Hello and welcome to our very special live stream tonight called The Halfway Point as we assess Blackburn Rovers at the halfway mark, 23 games into the season. I'm Ryan Hildred from Rovers Chat, ably joined by my strike partner, as usual, in his alias, Rovers Analytics. It's Joe Harvey. How are you, Joe?
Not so bad, mate. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Been excited to get this done, particularly after the news on Monday at 8 p.m. So nice to have a good chinwag about Rovers tonight, of course. Rovers fans watching in tonight is going to be a 90-minute or so show divided into three 30-minute sections. And Joe will tell you a little bit more.
Yes, so as you can see, we're currently joined by three of the Rovers Chat contributors, myself and Ryan, but it doesn't end there. We will have a total of 9 contributors joining us across 3 sections tonight to give a really good overview from our channel. And tonight we're starting with our first section and we're joined by Andy Watson, Jonathan Secker and Jacob Ward. Andy, how are you, mate?
Really good, mate. Yeah, worrying news across the pond, but as far as Rovers go, all positive, I think.
Absolutely.
Jonathan, how are you, mate?
Yeah, all good, thanks. Glad to be here. Looking forward to tonight.
And Jacob, yourself?
I'm good, thanks. Not sure I agree with Andy on all positive for Rovers at the minute anyway, but we'll come on to that, I'm sure.
I was going early to balance you out, Jacob.
Oh, it's going to be a tasty first panel.
It is. Rovers fans, we've got some specific topics to cover tonight across the 3 sections, as well as some standing questions for our panelists. But we do want plenty of interaction with you, our viewers, this evening. So please get your comments in, please get your opinions in, and it will help us through the night and tee up those discussion points for us. So lots of participation, please.
Okay. If you're new to the channel and you haven't subscribed, please do. If you're watching on YouTube, we are looking to try and build up the subscribers on there. And if you're on Twitter or Periscope, as whatever it's called, make sure you're following us on there too. If you join us from Facebook, awesome to see you. Make sure you follow us on all of our channels. Before we get started, we just want to remind everybody that we are sponsored by 6yardsout.com.
The Rovers Chat YouTube channel is proudly sponsored by 6yardsout.com. They've got retro football from every era with mugs, phone cases and much more. They also have plenty of Rovers goods, including apparel with the famous 94-95 season and this season's kit. Check them out using the link in the description below.
Thank you to the guys at 6yardsout.com, and good to see that we have some of our regulars in and some new faces in there as well. Lots of people saying hello, so hello to you all, and sorry, one and only Juice. I'm here to be distracted by the psychotic coup attempt happening in my country, so hopefully we give you a good distraction for the next couple of hours at least, one and only. So let's make a start on our first section then, guys. And I've themed this as Rovers' new style and the squad that Mowbray built. Sorry, I'm not very good with names, so that's what we've called it. And Andy, I'm going to start with you, just to ease us into this section. Just a really brief summary of how you think we've done so far.
Yeah, I suppose I open with all positive. I think it's been positive performances, and I think the overall trend has been positive. But obviously the results haven't quite followed the way the performances have. And I know that myself and Joel will delve into that maybe a little bit later in this half-hour section. But overall, quite happy. And some of the new signs have done well, some haven't done so well. But it's been some of the players that we've had for a while now that have really stepped up and improved this season. And, you know, it could really go one of 2 ways. But obviously, we're all hoping that'll be the positive way that'll go after this.
Absolutely. And you've teed up our next section, or the first topic within this section, really nicely. And it's about the summer signings. So we did make 8 summer signings, I think it was, but we're going to focus on 6 of them. Thomas Kaminski, Harvey Elliott, Barry Douglas, Tom Tribal, Tyrese Dolan and Daniel Ayala. Rovers fans, let us know how you think each of those have done, but we're going to run through them in turn as we go through, and I'm going to rotate across the panel. We're going to start with my favourite signing out of those 6. I've said it on our live streams before, and that is Thomas Kaminski. I absolutely love this guy and love what he's brought to Rovers, and just an all-round top goalkeeper and a psychotic character to boot as well. So I absolutely love that. So Jonathan, I'm going to start with you. How impressed have you been with Thomas Kaminski?
Yeah, really impressed, Ryan. Like you say, signing of the summer for us so far. Just so solid, so calm, so composed. Just a really imposing figure on the field. Obviously, I think he's probably would say that he's conceded more than he would have liked so far. He's certainly been unlucky in that as well. I could only really think of one goal, and that was maybe the second at Watford that I would say he was probably a little bit at fault for. But again, I think we have to take that with a pinch of salt with his natural starting position, playing so high up the field. I think also I would add, and it come from what you guys were saying on the 1875 pod review of the year, that we've actually overhauled our goalkeeping department this summer. We've got actually a lot of good permanent signings, and he heads that up. And I think the youngsters in the side, the other goalkeepers, can really take a lot from him as well. And he's fantastic. And the biggest compliment I can pay him is that we're not actually talking about the goalkeeping position, which we've done so much over the last 2 years.
Indeed, and we keep losing Jacob on the connection, so we'll try and resolve that. But Andy, I'm going to come to you next. This wasn't the intended order, but I'm going to come to someone who perhaps hasn't done so well, and that's Daniel Ayala. I mean, personally, I was really happy when we got this deal over the line. He's a greatly experienced centre-back at this level, but we did get warnings from those Middlesbrough fans about his injury record. Is there more to this than the injury record, though, and the injuries that he's had? Has he ever felt like a good match to Lenihan at that centre-back area?
Yeah, you team me up here, because we've had discussions about this, and you know that Joe and I think it was on the stats show when Ayala came in, and we had reservations about the similarities that he and Darryl Lenihan have. The fact that Ayala played almost his entire career as right centre back. Obviously, in Middlesbrough, he had Ben Gibson alongside him a lot of times, which is a natural left footer. So it was always a case of which one of those will play that left centre back position. But he's obviously brought him into play. You wouldn't bring him in on probably the wages that he's on, although I don't know exactly his contract, not to be playing. And obviously, Lenihan's our vice captain, I suppose, with Bennett, but he's been playing captain. So those two roles are going to be first choice. And I just never really saw how that was going to work as a partnership. And I think Ayala's best performance was when Lenihan was off the pitch against Brentford. So although I still think he's a good defender when fully fit, and I'm not going to give up on him because I don't think we've seen him fully fit yet, it's still going to be a concern of mine until they actually maybe get enough time on the training pitch to work out what they're going to do in terms of that partnership. And I think that's probably seen in the speculation at the moment of bringing in central defenders.
Mm-hmm.
Jacob, I'll just come to you on kind of my favourite summer signing. I've gone for Harvey Elliott, and I've been a fan of his all season. And I don't make any I don't hold back at all on our pre and post match streams about my feelings towards him. How good do you think he is, and what has he brought to the side?
He's been sensational, hasn't he?
Oh dear, we've lost Jacob a couple of times, so I think we might give up there. And I'll just quickly kind of add to that. Whilst we've lost Jacob,
he was right though, wasn't he? He has been.
Yeah, he has been sensational, and I think I did a little bit of stuff on the Rovers Analytics account today about his influence in the last game he played in central midfield, and he struggled a little bit in the second half, but for his age, I think he definitely fills in those positions well. Ryan, whilst we've lost Jacob, I guess I'll ask you for your opinions on Harvey Elliott.
He's been great, and it was a real surprise when we signed him. And when you think about Tyrese Dolan, who we'll speak about in a moment, it was like he was doing really well. And then we signed this kid, Elliott. I was nervous at first, actually, because I saw all the old Instagram stuff that he did at Fulham and got into a bit of trouble. And yes, Liverpool fans had talked him up a little bit, but I just thought, 17 years old, is he the right signing? But absolutely proved wrong. And I think you could tell, actually, from that first half at Watford when he made his debut, his touch and the finesse and his weight of pass and all of that, you could see from that moment that he was a player. And he's just grown and grown and grown and grown. And Mowbray's obviously given him those minutes. And he's a hugely influential player for our side now. And we've said it all along, haven't we, on the streams, how he's 17 is just remarkable, really, isn't it?
Just jumping on that point, I already going into plugging mode, but I asked Tony Cars about that, who's the head of coaching in the academy, and I asked him what influence Elliott had on our 17-year-olds that we've got, and our 17-year-olds looking at him. But he said it'd be an inspiration for them because Mowbray has shown that if you're good enough, then you're going to get a chance. And I think Harvey Elliott is proving that no matter what age you are, if you've got the ability, then you can shine.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. I think our order was a little bit messed up from Jacob dropping out, but I think we'll just quickly move on to the next kind of player we wanted to talk about, which was Tom Tribal. And Jonathan, I'm going to come to you on this one. I'm told that you have some friends who are Norwich fans. We've seen a few glimpses of what he can bring to the side. Huddersfield away, for example, before his injury. Firstly, how do you think he's done? And then, do you think he could find opportunities limited now with Travis's return?
Yeah. As you said, I've got quite a few friends who are Norwich fans, and they really, really bigged him up when we signed him. And I think a lot of people will remember that. I think it was a video of his performance against Leeds away for Norwich that went viral to show how sort of combative he was in midfield. But I think the jury's still out, really. As you say, we've seen glimpses. There was the Huddersfield one. There was also the Brentford away. I think Coventry away, his first start, he was okay. But I don't know. I don't know if he's ever going to be a player that shines. And in some ways, he's a player that the less you talk about him, maybe the more effective he's been. But I do think ultimately he's probably going to find his chances limited now that Travis is back. I don't even know whether we might even think about sending him back to Norwich. I don't know. So yeah, it's been a disappointment, and it's hard probably to say where he best fits within the three. We've had lots of conversations about, does he work with Johnson? Would he work with Travis? So yeah, it's very sort of like a up in the air one, really, that I can't really give a conclusive answer to.
Andy, the next one we're going to talk about is Barry Douglas. Probably the signing that divides the fans the most, I think, when I think about the comments on the live streams. Leeds and Wolves fans couldn't sing his praises highly enough when we signed him. And he might not have hit the heights of the 15 assists that he got with Wolves, but he is a great experienced pro to rely on, as we found out last week against Birmingham, being able to play him at right back. How do you think he's done for Rovers?
Honestly, I've been disappointed. That's not to say that I don't think that, again, a bit like Ayala, we haven't seen the best of Barry Douglas yet. Again, I don't think he's been 100% fit either at any point. Having said that, I don't think that his athleticism is the best, even when he is 100% fit, and that's been my main concern. It's like if you could splice Amari Bell and Barry Douglas and stick them back together as the same person, then we'd have the best left back in the league, I think. You know, we need to improve production in both full-back areas, even though Nyambi has been really good for us. That is key to our system, and I was hoping that Barry Douglas would be able to fill that gap. And he is good in the final third, and his set-piece delivery is probably still the best at the club, close with Stuart Downing, but because Douglas is on the pitch more, we see it a bit more often. But I was glad to see him really perform at right back. I liked him playing there, actually, because he can play good passes through midfield and clip them first time over the top, where his first time passes at fullback are always back inside. So, yeah, I have been disappointed, but I'm not ready to give up on him yet either. And, you know, let's hope that he gets more fitness and gets more chances. But it should definitely be horses for courses at left back. And Amari Bell still has something to offer. But really, we need to, like I say, invent some way of melding them together, I think, if we're going to get a really good left back.
So, again, we've lost Jacob, so our kind of order is a bit thrown out. But it's not the end of the world. The last player we're going to focus on is Tyrese Dowen. And obviously a bit of a fairy tale story, really. Signed on a free in the summer, and he's had a meteoric rise into the first team. He seems a really nice guy off the pitch as well. I think over the last couple of days, people have been really impressed with some of the things he's been saying after the announcement on Monday, kind of supporting fans potentially with mental health issues and stuff, and opening up his DMs to the public. Very nice. So, yeah, if it wasn't for arguably the best 17-year-old player in England, would Dolan have played more? And how impressed have you been with him? And Ryan, again, whilst we've lost Jacob, I'll ask you that question.
Yeah, I think he will have played more because I think Gallagher has had his critics, from the fan base, and I think there's been games that Gallagher hasn't impacted. So I think had Dolan carried on that trajectory, with the assists and with the dribbles and affecting games in that way, it would have been hard for Mowbray to ignore him. So I do think he would have played more games. I think now the way that we are managing the situation is absolutely spot on. Doing what he was able to do on Saturday and run that ball up the pitch and hold it up for Dak to score. I think that's a really good way for us to use him through the season as we go on, particularly as, teams are tired and the games are coming thick and fast. So I think we're developing this player really well at the moment. And I think, like Harvey Elliott, if your head is right off the pitch, you're going to go a long way in this game. And Dolan seems to have all that. He seems really grounded and a really nice lad. But yeah, I think he would have played more, definitely. But I've been thoroughly impressed with him and a real nice surprise.
Yeah.
Cool. So that covers our little focus on the signings. Two of them that we didn't talk about, of course, were Ainsley Pears and Antonis Sturgiakis. But do let us know what you think of those two if you've got an opinion. I'm just going to look at the comments that we have had from some of our fans, just as we've been talking about those. So a lot of love for Thomas Kaminski, unsurprisingly. Dizzy Thumbs, Kaminski best signing for me. El Scotty, Kaminski is class. Would love to see him with a settled back four in front of him. Autumn Penkridge, Tommy Kay has been great. Michael Pearson, Kaminski flawless, apart from the Watford goal, which I think is the one that Jonathan referenced there. FM Works, Elliott and Kaminski have been solid with a nice fire emoji there. Andy Curry, Tribal probably does the Evans job, back up for Travis and Johnson. Yeah, I can see that, Andy, definitely. FM Works agreeing with you, Andy, on Barry Douglas, to different style left backs, which doesn't help Tony Mowbray. Two different style left backs, which doesn't help Tony Mowbray. And then one and only Juice. Dolan may benefit in the long term from not playing quite as much. So yeah, lots of nice comments that we've had from the viewers so far just on those. So we are going to move into our next topic of this evening, which is about our style of play, our possession game, and then some analytics stuff from Andy and Joe as well. Got a few slides that Andy and Joe are going to talk us through now. So we're going to start with Andy on a few, then it'll be over to Joe, then back to Andy, and then that's going to tee up some questions for Jonathan and what would have been Jacob. So it might end up coming to me again, maybe. So Andy, we're going to start with you then, just on your slides.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So I guess I just wanted to highlight with this one the amount of change that's kind of been going on in the last year or so, especially whilst Bradley Dack was out. Thankfully, he is back, though, and what a finish that was to announce him being back. Yeah, so it's difficult to kind of put into words the amount of change, which is why I've kind of put loads of numbers to it. But Walton for Kaminski, we've already said Kaminski's come in and done an amazing job. Amari Bell is still there, Ryan Amby's still there, and Lenihan's still there. But we've really found it difficult, I think, to replace Tosin Darabayo. And that constant change, I think someone mentioned it in the comments, not having a settled back four in front of Kaminski is really, I think, maybe been the most detrimental thing that's happened to us this season. In terms of in front of that back four, playing that 4-3-3 has been a massive difference to the 4-2-3-1. Not having that double pivot there has meant maybe a little bit more exposure to a very exposed back four and constant changing back four. So it only really works as well, I've found, when we've got Holtby and Rothwell in that midfield. You've got a left footer on the right and the right footer on the left, and everything kind of points in towards Adam Armstrong, who we will talk about, I'm sure, later on in this show, in terms of his shot numbers, the number of goals that he scored in this season, because everything in this team is pointing towards that central area, with Elliott and Brereton also being of opposite foot going inside, which is why it's so important that those fullbacks run up and down the field and are able to supply right into the centre of that box. So it's a good system when we get the right personnel out, but what we've seen a few times this season already is that when you've not got the right personnel in the right positions, then it all kind of falls apart, and it's very difficult to actually trying to get through that centre, which is why so many teams have put that low block in right in front of the 18-yard box and challenged us to get through it, which we know has been a recurring theme, that we've not really been able to do that as often as we would have liked. But in terms of, if we can move on to the next slide, if you can actually break down what we've done over the last few years, and this is Mowbray's progression into his own style, as opposed to the Danny Graham and Bradley Dack axis. We've increased our possession since the first season we were in the Championship by almost 8%. We have almost 100 more passes per game than we started off in that first season. And hand in hand with that really goes the accuracy as well. We have more passes, ergo, there's more accuracy within that. But what that actually means in terms of our style, if we move on to the next slide, is that we see a lot more, and a lot of people have complained that we've seen a lot more back passing, a lot more lateral passing, which is absolutely true. We've had 26% more back passes than we had in the first season. We've had 50% more lateral passes, which is sideways passes. So we keep the ball a lot more and we don't force it forward as much. But even if you look at the forward passes, we've actually had 13% more forward passes since the first season that we were back in the Championship. What I've done at the bottom there is taken a percentage of all of our passes and kind of broke it down to see what has changed. And yes, for those people who do complain about the way that we pass backwards and sideways, you can see in that bottom graphic there that we do, as a percentage of our overall passes, do more lateral and more back and fewer forward, but also fewer long passes. And I think that's the way that Mowbray wants us to play, is to shift defences around as much as we can in terms of getting them out of position and then being able to go in between the gaps with the likes of Harvey Elliott and Lewis Holtby. And if anyone does watch the stats show, you might have seen the one with Jay from Market Insights, who pinpointed that inside right position as a key area for us to be able to play forward through. And a lot of our goals, if you watch, come from Holtby or Elliott coming into that half space and being able to play a ball through the defence or over the defence to get us a chance on goal. So that's the style, and that you can see how that's changed. And if you just look at the last one, how that kind of passing pattern manifests itself in attacking output is that we produce a lot more shots and a lot more better chances, really. We have an XG, that's gone up by 6%. Our goals have gone up by 18%, and our shots have gone up by a massive 30%. So even though we're not playing as direct and as forward as we were when we first came back into the Championship, the way that we've changed for this season is having a positive effect on the number of shots and the number of chances that we are creating, even though it might not seem that way all the time. And that's it.
That's yours. Well, I think we're on to Joe. It's on to you for the next little section, isn't it? Andy's teed that up really nicely, but onto your slides now.
Yeah, so obviously on the pre and post match streams, we talk a lot about what that possession really means. So obviously Andy's kind of showed there that we're having a lot more possession than we used to. And then I often ask the question, is that what we really want? Is that actually bringing us what we need? And we kind of talked about a lot this year about the way that possession correlates to results. So last season, whenever our possession sat in that kind of 48 to 52% mark, we were losing and drawing games more often than not. And then when possession kind of hit the really high marks, your 60s and 70s, and the really low marks, your 30s and 40s, you could see that we were winning or losing games. It was a little bit more drastic. This season, there's definitely more an eclectic mix, but there is a kind of very tight-knit group there with our losses. Basically, we aren't losing games when we have 80% of the ball, and we aren't losing games by having less of the ball. It's really difficult to get your head around, though, and definitely harder to understand this season than it was from last year. So obviously a much wider spread on draws and wins from last year, which is definitely a positive, which kind of shows that we are winning games in different ways. And I think the Rotherham game versus the Wickham game is a great example of that, a game where we really had to push. And then on the next slide, I've kind of got basically the same situation, but this is the possession when we're trailing in games. So when we're a goal or more down, how much possession have we had? The only outlier, of course, is the Brentford match, down to 10 men, down at a very low percentage. But we managed to get the goal. We managed to get the draw out of that game. What we usually find is when we have conceded the lead in a game and we are chasing, in some games this year, we've had 89% possession after conceding a goal. and still lost the game. And I think those extreme ends of possession really don't suit what we need to do. And yeah, there's only one win from behind this year, so I didn't include wins there. I thought that would be a bit too much of an outlier, not enough data on that one yet. But yeah, so as you can see, when we're trailing in games, we are struggling. And when we get that first goal, we're usually all right. And then just following on from what Andy was talking about, these are some position map data. So the main thing that we'll talk about first is the kind of bottom one there, through passes. You can see that our key sector is that Harvey Elliott, Lewis Holtby space that Andy was referring to. So those through balls cutting in off the right-hand side with the left foot. Blue squares on these graphs are above league average. Well, actually, they're different on each one, but for the through passes, blue is better than league average, and orange is worse than league average. So you can see that even though we've got quite low percentages in kind of that right back area and those central striking areas, they are actually above league average there. And then ball possession losses. So where are we giving the ball away? Pretty much average with the rest of the league on that. No real outliers there to analyse for me. But the kind of main thing for me as well on the pressing, on the defensive front, is the ball recoveries and the fouls committed. So you can kind of see that we're trying to force teams into wide areas. We are pressing high up the pitch, but we're not pressing necessarily to win the ball back. We're pressing to kind of force opposition centre-backs into slightly wider areas and playing those balls down the channel. And you can kind of see really that through the middle of the pitch, we are kind of quite quiet. So dribbles through the middle, very low. We do try and get the ball wide or bypass the midfield entirely. There's only really Joe Rothwell that really drives through the middle with the ball. We're usually looking for slightly longer balls. So yeah, that's some interesting data there on positions, and obviously those will get updated as we go on the Rovers Analytics account.
Great. So I think the final piece of the jigsaw is back to Andy for your final slides, mate, just on our style of play and the possession and things.
Yeah, a comment in the thing there, Connor Higgins saying these stats seem to suggest we're playing much better and our league position isn't. We're certainly playing a different style, and I would say that style is more is better for gaining results over the long term. But yes, we haven't quite seen that in our results. And what I've put together here is a few people who specialise in putting out data and kind of almost forecasting in some cases where we're going to end up. So you can see there the Mark O'Hare stuff. Our X points is expected points based on expected goals rather than the actual goals that go in. And that only has us as 10th, and obviously we're 11th at the moment, so not much of a difference there. The XGR, which is XG ratio, again, not that much different from where we are at the moment, 9th. I should say that these came from before our previous game against Birmingham, so they may have gone up slightly. But you can see the other performance indicators there, which is open play. XG ratio has us in the playoff positions, which, maybe points to our weakness at set pieces as well in terms of attacking set pieces and defensive ones. And we haven't touched on that yet. Maybe you will later on. And then shots in the box is the final one. And we were able to get so many shots off from within the box and actually concede fairly few shots in the box. And that has us as 4th. And again, all those things, you might think, well, what's the point of them? But these are performance indicators that tend to suggest that over a bigger spell of games, a larger sample size, if you want to be mathematical about it, that our trajectory is upwards. And that's proven by, well, not proven by, but also suggested by, the exposition that we've got from Infogol and Experimental 361, who has us as the 3rd highest performing team in the league, despite our results. Infogol do forecast us as 10th, but they had a very low opinion of us to start the season. They had us down in around 16th position. And the same for 538, which is an American-based analytics company, who had us at the start of the season down at around 16th, but now forecast us the top half position. And I wonder, I know that a lot of us predicted around about 9th, 10th at the start of the season. So we're not too far off that, really. And for all those naysayers out there for Mowbray out, I wonder, let's give it the rest of the season and then see where we're at in terms of whether those forecasts were accurate or not. And then this final one, just to indicate again how different our our performances are at the moment. So you can see all those things that I mentioned there: XG ratio, XG open play ratio, and shots in the box. This is last season's, and for the whole of the season, we were 16th in the league, 13th and 15th. So we actually outperformed our performance metrics last season by quite a substantial amount, finishing in the top half. And if we can, now that we've raised those, and yet our position's still the same. So if our position in terms of actual results can raise alongside of that performance data, then we're going to be in a good position. And I think the overall trend is upwards for us.
And that's all the slides over. So we wanted to give a good airing of the analytics stuff. Andy and Joe do some great stuff on our stats and getting under the skin of Rovers in that way. At the end of this little section, and before Andy goes, I'm just going to ask Andy to talk about some of the stuff that he's been up to. But Jacob, we've got you back with us on a stable connection now. We've done a little deep dive into Rovers, into their style of play, into some of those performance metrics. And we can't ignore the fact that Tony Mowbray has come under some criticism recently. Looking at those stats, for me, it does feel like we're not far off and we are going in the direction. But what's your view on the manager? What's your view on our style of play? Do you feel like he's earned the right to be patient? Whilst I just laugh at the best picture that Dan has ever found of Tony Mowbray and Bradley Dack. That's just, you can see how my mind operates, that I'm laughing at that picture. But Jacob, yeah, what's your views on the manager and should we be patient?
In my opinion, I feel like anyone who is Mowbray out, I feel like we have been patient enough with him at this moment in time. I feel like this is the best squad we've had since relegation from the Premier League, in my opinion. I believe this squad is stronger than the squad that had the likes of Rudy Gestede, Craig Conway, Ben Marshall, all those great players. I believe this squad is better. Whether it's better as a starting 11, that can be up for debate. But in terms of pure squad depth, this is the strongest we've had. And there's no doubting that, in my mind, this squad is underperforming at the minute, unfortunately. We're still yet to beat a team above us. And the amount of times we come on these post-match games and just say the same things about tactics in terms of we have all the ball and, like got showed, it's a lot of sideways and backwards passing and stuff. And as much as I love Tony Mowbray, it gets to a point where sometimes you have to wonder whether it is time for a change. I'm not fully Mowbray out, don't get me wrong. If I would love nothing more than him to change this second half of the season round, but my expectations going into this season from the signings we made, getting the likes of Harvey Elliott, were that we need to improve and progress on last season, which was to be in and around the top six. There was parts of last season where obviously it was looking like we could maybe make it. You just have to think to after that Bristol game, after the lockdown, a lot of people were saying we can do this. And to find ourselves in a worse position than we were last season, it's just a bit disheartening. The only thing is I hope that we've got Dak back now, we've got Travis back, we've got Brereton back, and it's going to be a tall order for us to get in and around the playoffs, but we have our best players back now. So if we are able to do it, now we can do it, hopefully, but there's still no denying that even without those players, we have underperformed and we should be doing better than we are, in my opinion.
And Jonathan, before we come to you and Joe's going to ask the question, I just want to dip into the comments. So Callum Robinson, those stats seem to suggest we're playing much better, and yet our league position is not. Connor Higgins, those stats seem to suggest we're playing much better, and yet our league position is not. So two identical comments there. Alexander Haben, should we be disappointed with our league position and points tally, or is it understandable given the defensive issues and missing players? Michael Pearson, performances deserve a better position. Stats are bearing that out. And then El Scotty, those stats give me a headache. I sympathise with you, El Scotty. They're not for everyone, El Scotty, but we're giving a fair representation to everything on our channel tonight. So thank you, everyone, for your patience if stats aren't the thing for you. Sorry, Joe, just to butt in there.
No, you're all right. I think Yeah, I think for me on the Mowbray one, I think there's a good comment from Alexander Haben there. For me, what the data suggests is that the system works, and that we're creating the chances, and potentially, as Mowbray alluded to a couple of weeks ago, maybe it's more we should be saying which individuals aren't performing. Because for me, I think that we've lost enough games and drawn enough games that we should have won, not because of the system, but more for me anyway, because of individuals. But Jonathan, what's your view on this current debate that we're talking about now? Is it Tony Mowbray? Is it individuals? What do you think?
I think there's lots of little factors that come into it. I can understand where fans have frustration in the points that Jacob's raised. I'm still think we need a bit more patience. We need a bit more time. The stats that you and Andy have shown are really good, really interesting, and show that there is elements of progress, etc. This season's not like no other in terms of the relentlessness of games, nature, COVID, etc. But I still think we're in with a shout. I still think if we keep everyone fit, which I know is a massive if, we get a bit of consistency. We have to start beating those teams that are above us. I still think we've got a real good chance. Ultimately, I don't think I'll ever be a Mowbray out man, but I just can't see how at the moment anyone can come in and do better in terms of where we are, in terms of not just on the pitch, but off the pitch as well. How stable we are, how much the academy setup's working well, etc. But I do appreciate ultimately results do dictate for managers. But I think we've got to at least give them to the end of the season to see where we are.
And Andy, as we look to close off this section and substitute in some other panelists, just as a final question for you, what are your hopes and expectations for the end of the season, and then maybe into 2021 as a whole, into next season as well? What are your hopes and expectations?
I think just for us to start getting those results that are, closer to the data that's been shown. And I agree with Jacob in a way. Like, you can't keep having these results despite what the performances are telling you, and keep saying, well, we've got to keep going with him just because there's, the performances are good. You still have to get those results. I get that. But as Jonathan said, this is not like any other season. And I do think that does play a part in it. The relentless nature, we don't actually have any time, and you've heard Mowbray say it, to work on this on the training pitch. And so when you're bringing in these new players, and when you're trying to change so much of the system at this particular time of football, which is crazy, it's really an uphill task. And Joe's right with the individual mistakes. So if those get eradicated, and if we keep being able to play our football and hopefully turn some of those fine margins around, I can see us getting close to the playoffs. I can't see us getting in. I think there need to be a massive swing of, I think you said on the last live stream that you did, you need about 72, 73 points usually to get in. And that would need a really good second half of the season, which I think we might just fall short of. So for me, anything between 7th and 10th is acceptable. Anything below that, you're starting to get just okay. And then if you're finishing bottom half, especially under 15th, then that's just not good enough.
So before you three go, sorry, I'm going to be asking all 9 of our Rovers Chat panelists this evening to give us a grade on Rovers so far at the halfway mark in the season. So like a school grade, so A, B, C, D, E, F, and you can put a plus or minus in there if you want as well. So Jacob, I'm going to start with you, and Rovers fans, let us know in the comments as well how you would grade Rovers so far. How would you rate Rovers this season in a school grade so far at the halfway point?
Well, for me at this moment in time, it would have to be a D, unfortunately. Failing, in my opinion. Like I've already said, I think this is the best squad we've had, and it needs to be doing better than the squad we had last season, and it just simply hasn't. It hasn't. There hasn't been much progression on top of last season, and I do worry that this is a squad that's going to be not as strong next season going into that season, because I feel like we're going to lose the likes of Adam Armstrong, whether that's be this window or the summer window. We're obviously going to lose Harvey Elliott. and that they're two quality players that, you know, you're wondering whether they can be replaced. So I feel like this is the best chance we had in a long time to make the playoffs, and the opportunity's not been took, unfortunately.
Well, in our final section, we will be talking about the January transfer window and incomings and contracts. So stick with us for that one. Jonathan, if you were to rate and grade, where are you?
I'm in between C plus, B minus, I think. Probably I'll go C plus, I think, because I think there's lots of good things in terms of the amount of chances we're creating, the amount of goals we've scored, especially considering our injuries. We're absolutely fantastic, as the results show, if we score the first goal with 25 out of 27 points. But ultimately, there's a must-do better element about it in terms of we're too inconsistent, we've lost too many, we've struggled to break teams down, though admittedly, that is not just a failing of ours. We see the best teams in the country do that. And for me, I just think we're probably... I know we're 5 points off the playoffs at the moment, but if teams win their game in hand, that could potentially be 8 points, which is then a sort of like a 3-game swing to get that back. And that's just a little bit too much for me at the moment. I think we need to be that 4 to 6 range and staying about there where I feel more comfortable with. But plenty to be positive about.
Yeah, and there's lots agreeing with you and Jacob in there. There's a few C's, few D's, few B's. So I think everyone's roughly around the same. Andy, what's your grade for Rovers at the halfway point?
B minus. I'm probably on the more positive side of Rovers fans anyway, usually. So it doesn't surprise me that I'm kind of going up in that B section. But there's obviously lots to work on. Just quickly, someone made a point about it not being individualised, about it being systemic. The only thing that I would say is that Mowbray needs to improve upon is to get these. Is it about the focus of the players? Is he preparing them all the time to be focused all the time? And that is possibly a failing of Mowbray's as well as the individuals involved. So if we can improve that, then that B minus will go up to a B plus, and hopefully by the end of the season we'll be closer to where we need to be.
And I think this is where I think he's possibly been a little bit unlucky with injuries to Ayala, with Barry Douglas perhaps not being the player we want him to be, with Elliot Bennett being injured. These are big players in the dressing room. Bradley Dack, of course, big players who aren't there. So, you know, I think there's something in what you've said there, Andy. So we've lost Jacob already, but Andy, before we let you go, you know, we are just, as I say, it is a spectrum of what we do on the Rovers Chat site tonight. Can you just talk us through the two things that you've been up to, you know, the Stats Show and the Academy podcast? Just talk us through both those things and where Rovers fans can find that.
Yeah, I won't keep you too long, but obviously on this channel, if you're on YouTube, then you can see the Rovers Chat YouTube channel, and that's growing and growing with the amount of content that we're putting on and all the live streams. But the Stats Show has been going since last summer. We're up to 51 now, released 51 yesterday, which is the 5 centre-backs Rovers could sign this month. And basically, you saw a little bit of what I kind of specialise in earlier. El Scotty got a headache from it, which is funny because he's one of the regulars watchers of the Stats Show. I know he enjoys it. But just basically going into a little bit more depth into our performances, the reason why things happen on the football pitch. And in this particular case, looking at 5 good signings that we could make in January, which you will touch on in the show later on, I'm sure. So definitely subscribe and take a look at that if you've not done so before. There's a lot of content already on there, which is really interesting. You'll find that Joe, I think all 3 of you guys have been on the Stats Show actually as well. So thank you for everyone who comes on it and makes it a good experience. In terms of the Academy stuff, we launched Rovers Academy Twitter account this season. And we're just expanding more and more. Stuart Jones actually came to us and said, would you like to do some more with the Academy staff and players? And yes, of course we would. So we started with this Inside the Rovers Academy podcast series, where we talk to the big dog himself, head of Academy, Stuart Jones. And it's about a half-an-hour interview where he tells us about his story, how he got involved in Academy coaching, how he came to Rovers, and then inside what we do and how it's set up and all the age groups that we go down. And then there's a Q&A that's coming out tomorrow at 5 o'clock, which asks some of your questions. And again, I think Jonathan and Joe asked some really good questions that got answers, and so did some of the members of the fans on Twitter. We also have interviews already done with Tony Cars, which follows a similar thing. But if there's anyone that you would like us to speak to in the Academy, any players, you want to name, or any other members of staff that he wants to talk to, we can go to Stuart Jones, and he said he'll try and make them available for us. So that's a really good thing going through in the future.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andy. And I love this stuff. I've said to you directly before, Andy, that my brain can't produce the content that you and Joe do, but I absolutely love seeing all of that stuff and just adding it to, my opinion and stuff like that. So thank you for the stuff that you do. And yeah, Rovers fans, go and check it out. It is on our YouTube channel. So as I said at the start of this show, we are now going to break into our second section and attempt something that we've never done before, which is substitute out panelists for different panelists. So Andy and Jonathan, we will say goodbye to you two. Thanks for joining us and giving your insight.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
No worries. Whilst that happens, me and Joe are basically going to have some filler discussion and waffle, maybe with a bit of audience participation. So Rovers fans and Joe, I want to know what your favourite goal of the season so far is. So Joe, I'm going to ask you and we'll see what pops into the comments as well, just whilst we bring in our three new panellists.
I should have thought about this before we started, shouldn't I?
I can give you a visual clue if you want. Dan's prepped some visual aids. If you need some help.
Visual aids. I like that. Yeah, God, tough question. I think that's one of the best things about this season so far, isn't it? That we have scored some great goals. As somebody who really loves a counter-attack, I am quite partial to some of our more kind of build-up goals. I mean, like last year for me, my favourite goal of the season was that Brentford 1-0 at home. The Armstrong, Rothwell, Downing, and then back to Dak to tap in past Raya. That was my favourite goal last year. So, yeah, I really don't know how to think. I'll tell you what, Ryan, you give me yours and I'll keep thinking.
As the comments are flooding in, I realise I've dropped an absolute flipping clanger because I have forgotten two of Harvey Elliott's goals, the one against Millwall and the one against Norwich. So there should actually be a picture of Harvey Elliott there as well. But my mind with these two pictures, the Sam Gallagher goal at Coventry, I really liked. Just the neat interplay, the little flick from Elliott. And Rothwell, I think it was, and then the cross for Gallagher, just like that as a really nifty little goal. And then Brereton's volley away at Watford. I mean, What a strike that was. So they were the two images, but I absolutely have to apologise to Harvey Elliott because I've forgotten two of the goals, which are probably the best ones.
I'll throw one in there that nobody's said yet, which not just for the goal, but also for the context of the game that he had, the sound as the ball hit the back of the net. I do think that Bradley Johnson's opener against Derby, his first goal away at Derby, was a really good goal. Yes, the defenders from Derby should have put him under some more pressure, but it was a great finish into the bottom corner, and he went on to get a second, and I really enjoyed that goal myself.
I tell you, there's a reason why I asked for audience participation, because there's another goal I've forgotten as well. This is what I do for prepping all of this. Rothwell's against Sheffield Wednesday, Autumn Penkridge. You've absolutely hung me out to dry there. How have I forgotten these goals? What's going on?
38 of them or something like that. It's too many.
Oh, my word. Well, as you can see, Rovers fans, we are being joined by our next panel, and that has gone seamlessly. I am absolutely gobsmacked that went so well, Joe. So that was brilliant. So as you can see, Rovers fans, we have been joined by three new Rovers Chat panelists. We've now been joined by Luke Kimberley, Tom Schofield, and Ollie Hayworth. How are you doing, Luke?
Yeah, great. It's really good to get involved in on this. It's really enjoyed the analytics stuff and some of the takes from the earlier section. So let's go again now. Great stuff. And yourself, Tom?
Yeah, just echo what Luke said, really. Analytics, not necessarily my thing in terms of producing. I just like talking a load of rubbish, really. So, yeah.
And we've got Ollie Hayworth, who is here for his live stream debut, but he is a veteran of the 1875 podcast. How are you doing, Ollie?
Yeah, good. Very glad to be on. Yeah, pressure's on. Like Tom and Luke said, the first part was very good. So tough act to follow, I think.
You'll be fine. You'll be absolutely fine. So, Rovers fans, this second section is just looking at our results in a bit of detail month by month. And we're going to see also at the end of that how we compare to others in the top 12. But Ollie, I'm going to ease you in just very gently before we go into that. What's been your favourite match this season?
I'd have to say the Preston 3-0 away win. I think we touched on this previously that, yeah, I think it's just got too many things that went for us. Bad record recently at Preston, particularly the 3-2 turnaround last season, having been winning 2-0 up, having been 2-0 up. Derby game, as always, played really, really well. Clean sheet and the little cherry on top of Dolan scoring at the end, which, yeah, was very much almost scripted. But I actually, I don't think I ever envisaged he would. He generally comes on as a sub, but you didn't actually think he'd probably score, and he did. So, yeah, pretty unbeatable, I think, despite, we've had 5-0, 4-0, we've had some really good performances. I think that's the one that sticks out for me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ollie. So we're going to start the focus month by month. And Joe, we are over to you. And we've got a few slides that will support all of this. So hopefully everyone can see that as we go.
Yep. So we're going to start with September. Pretty solid start for us, really. I think we were unlucky on the first game against Bournemouth, 3-2 loss. And then, obviously, as we'll all remember, 9 goals in 2 games, home to Wickham and away at Derby. I've just talked about the Derby game with the Bradley Johnson goal. And September, probably one of the better months. You've got to be happy with a 5-0 and a 4-0. So, Tom, do you think that those two results raised expectations and perhaps raised fan expectation above what's realistic for this season?
Probably slightly. But I think at the time we were also saying that it was only Wickham and Derby had obviously had a terrible start, and people were also saying that. It's a tough one to answer that, really, to be honest with you, Joe. I'd say overall, yeah, it did, just because I think people didn't expect us to do it, and then I'm obviously going to speak about it in the October month, but obviously Coventry happened as well, and it seemed to be that we could blow teams out of the water. And really, it's not happened consistently. More than what it has done in previous seasons. But we've been unable to keep it up, and I think it's set a precedent almost that Rovers now can't live up to those performances, because for starters, teams finding us out a little bit, they can stifle us better than they were doing then. And yeah, it's a tough one. I think it did raise them significantly. Overall, just because of the way that we won the games.
And Luke, I took a lot of satisfaction actually from the Wickham game after last season's record against the promoted teams and the Ainsworth factor and him coming to Ewood. I think it just had 1-0 Wickham all over it. But which win pleased you more? Was it the Wickham game at home, or was it that Derby away win, spanking a team like Derby 4-0 away?
I think both of them were important in their own way. Like you said, the Wickham one, it's one of them games we could easily go down and sort of fall into that, like you said, that 1-0 defeat. But we didn't, and that's when I think Dolan really came onto the scene that game and really took it by storm, having had a great pre-season as well. I think the thing to take from both of them games is that we actually had double figures shots on target, which is phenomenal, really. And then you've got to say we were clinical as well, because we've scored 9 goals across 2 games. Derby's always one of them games. I think every season we struggle against Derby. We did it, last season as well, towards the end. So, but both well within their own rights with great results, but. Yeah, perhaps the Derby one for me, because they are just one of them sides that even when they're on a bad run of form, if you're going to call a team a bogey side, then Derby are absolutely that for Rovers every season. So nice to actually get a good result over them. Really, it's one of them teams we do come unstuck. So enjoyed that one.
Sorry, Ryan, just to quickly on this one, not to make comment or say anything bad about the graphic on screen, but to the best of my knowledge, we had 32% possession in that game against Derby. Really, really low possession. I know that different sources kind of differ and stuff, but I definitely think it was a little bit lower than what's there, and that was something I was quite impressed with out of that game. I just wanted to get that in there.
Sure. It's over to you next anyway, Joe.
I just wanted to mention that. It sounds like I'm just being really pedantic, but that was the one game this season where I thought, we really kind of did sat back and just hit them on the counter, and it worked 4 times. But yeah, that was a good game. So I think we're moving on to October then, are we?
We are.
Awesome. So not the most productive month, just the 1 win. And it was a good win, but 4 losses and then a 0-0 draw against Cardiff. Is this the month where frustrations in the fan base maybe started to surface, Ollie? And in particular, not beating kind of what you would perceive as rivals in Cardiff, Swansea and Reading?
Yeah, I think so. I think I remember at the time that 0-0 when Cardiff had gone down to 10 men, and then the kick in the teeth at the end of the Forest game, which was a little undeserved, was, I think, whenever we have those slightly flatter performances at home, it often gets the fan base fairly vocal and, starts to turn maybe a few opinions against Mowbray. But I think we didn't play badly, but we weren't quite at the fluidity we saw, even though we lost the first 2 games in the Bournemouth and then in the Cup. We actually played really well throughout that first month. I think all of the performances were very good, whereas these weren't quite as good, these 2 games, and to come away with only 1 point was very disappointing. And then you're leading into the Watford game, where we actually played remarkably well, gave a really good account of ourselves. But yeah, I'm sure we'll go into it, but silly mistakes and letting in silly goals and not taking our chances, and it suddenly a very positive month before was starting to look a little bleak. But we then there was that little bounce back with the Coventry game, but then I felt a very similar story. You got to the end of the month and you've got Swansea away. That was almost sort of a predictable loss. That we don't have a brilliant record at Swansea. They are a good side, and we weren't quite at it, and we sort of lost that game quite limply, really. Didn't put up much of a fight, and they kind of saw us off quite easily, which was a bit disappointing. So they're really contrasting months, actually, because I was really hopeful after that opening month, and actually felt quite drab at the end of October. But then I'm sure you're going to go into it that we sort of then rolled into a slightly better month afterwards. So it's just been very up and down, I think, and never dull as a Rovers fan, but often frustrating.
So Tom, Ollie's teed that up beautifully for us. We're moving into November now. There were 2 games before the international break. We drew the first one in a forgettable televised Sky game, actually, against Middlesbrough at Ewood Park. But then we went into that game against QPR, and I looked at the table. We were down in 15th place, 6 points off the playoffs at that point. And I do remember on our streams, we'd started doing the live streams at that point, and I do remember Mowbray under some quite severe pressure before that QPR game, and it was a run of 1 win in 7. How important do you think that 3-1 win against QPR was for Mowbray, actually, before the international break?
Certainly alleviated some pressure, and obviously going into an international break, you always want it to be on the back of a win because it sticks in the mind. I know we've spoke on the pod actually about how the Derby loss before lockdown stuck in the mind for a long time, and obviously it's the same with international breaks. It's at the forefront, and a loss I think really would have put some pressure on him, similar to the way the pressure's on him at the moment, and it's sort of been alleviated with the win against Birmingham. Yeah, the QPR. It was a good performance, QPR, as well. It's easy to forget that we played actually quite well there. And looking back now, it was a pretty good month, weren't it? I forgot about some of those results. The 2-1 Barnsley. Don't know why I forgot about it, but I did. Probably because we played a bit rubbish. But yeah, good one. Obviously, the 3-0 with Preston was brilliant. I think to have blown them out of the water the way we did after a torrid few games at Deepdale. Yeah, it hasn't been a happy hunting ground for us, and for us to go there and just basically embarrass them was satisfying, and would have only been better if fans had been there. But yeah, it was a good month. I think in the same way that those large victories sort of increased expectations, I think this month did as well. Obviously unbeaten, comfortably beat Preston, played poorly against Barnsley, but still managed to get the win. Who knew it was all going to go so poorly in the coming month?
Joe, I just want to dive in really quickly before you ask Luke his question. I just want to nod, whilst we've got this up on screen, to Luke's Hall of Fame prediction that he did do on the pre-match live stream before this Preston game. For those of you that didn't see it on our pre-match stream, we asked all our viewers, as we usually do, what the score prediction for the Preston game was. And Luke Kimberley, who had consumed some alcohol at that point, I'm not
Absolutely
sure.
Not.
Maybe not. Predicted 3-0 Rovers and Dolan to score. So that came true, and we moved him into our Hall of Fame on the live stream. So whilst we've got that stat on there and this slide, I just want to give your name in lights again, Luke. Sorry, Joe.
I thought that earlier when Andy said that nobody expected Tyrese Dolan to come off the bench and score. I thought, well.
He's been riding that wave for like a month now. I think we should stop gaslighting it.
No, come on.
You can ask him a proper
Luke,
question.
where are you in the predictions league? Hey,
oh, I'm shocking, mate.
Like me.
No, that's where we need to be.
Bro, Luke, we came back after the international break with quite an intense period to look at, and we chatted a lot on our pre- and post-match streams about this 12-game run, and this is kind of where we're up to now in our review. It's 12 games in 6 weeks, and we ended November and started that 12-game block with a draw and 2 wins. Did that leave you thinking that we could get a decent run and a decent return from those 12 fixtures?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we first started looking at them at that 12-week block, we were looking at sort of 24 points and being fairly ambitious on the stream. And after the October month and how we sort of fell to pieces in that month, on the back of what Ollie's already said, a couple of bad results there, and obviously then went into November, got some good results. So we're looking at a little bit more positive, but know that we're needing points. So optimism and hope, I guess, is then letting us think, well, 24 points, that's achievable, let's get up there, sort of thing. So yeah, it was looking good at that point, and we finish in November then in 9th position, having taken 11 points from 15. Going into December, and it just all went a bit wrong in December, didn't it?
I was just going to say, because that kind of leads us on from there, kind of as we head into December. And I was just going to come to Ollie on that. We kind of did see a little bit of I don't want to say a capitulation. I think it's difficult, isn't it, Luke? And I think you were about to touch on it, but I was going to come to Ollie on that. There were a couple of disappointing results as we went into December. What do you reckon, Ollie? Do you think that capitulation's fair?
I don't know. It sometimes needs a bit of context. I'm probably a bit like Andy. I'm quite a positive Rovers fan as they go. I think you look at injuries and the chopping and changing of the back four, and Lewis Travis still waiting for Dak, and yeah, I think there were games where, and the volume of games that have been packed in between the start of the season and where we are now, I think you just see performances where it just was a bit too much, and capitulation is, I might say, a little harsh, but I mean, I've been pretty hacked off after certain games this season, and I know the live streams, it's not been easy because there have been some really highs, but some really, really frustrating lows. But I think there's just got to be a little bit of context when you've got to look at the season as a whole and the players we've had available and the injuries we've had to contend with. But I don't know, on the other side of the coin, you'd say we're not alone. We can't sit here as the only team in the Championship going. We've had really, a really difficult injury and COVID situation to deal with because everyone's in the same boat. We've played teams and won, and we've played teams and lost where they've probably faced bigger issues than us on the day and got the better of us. So I don't know. I'm frustrated more than capitulation.
And Luke, I'm just going to jump in here. Hunter's Army's made a good comment here that he doesn't remember the last December month where Rovers did particularly well over the last 5 to 10 years. And if you look at the final 2 games in December, Sheffield Wednesday on Boxing Day and Huddersfield on the 29th, that did leave a little bit of a sour taste in the mouth to that month, didn't it? And another festive period where Rovers just struggled to get some good results.
Yeah, that's sort of where I've been sitting on evaluating Rovers against previous seasons, because I know on the previous stream we're talking about, Jacob mentioned that we haven't improved on last season. I think you've got to take it into perspective, because actually at this point last season we'd played 26 games and we were only on 36 points. So we're actually 3 games better off at this point, and only 4 points off that points total. You've got to really take into account that we've gone through the festive period much earlier in the season than we would have done, due to obviously circumstances surrounding COVID and a delayed season. So I think you have got to take into account that we do always have, it just seems like that on recent years. As a Rovers fan, you just feel that the festive period is always one where we just seem to maybe just falter a little bit, not pick up points in games that perhaps other times of the season we'd expect to pick points up. Your Stokes, your Sheffield Wednesdays, your Huddersfields, and we do find ourselves getting frustrated in games like that over the festive period. And whether it is a mental block or just absolute a tiredness thing, maybe we don't really attack the festive period quite well for whatever reason, who knows. But yeah, I think it is, we've got to look at it from a perspective as well of timings this season, and that that festive period come at a bad time.
So in terms of what all this means, we're going to bring up a few tables in a moment, but I'm just going to dip into the comments. So Alexander Haben, Rovers can be really good on the counter-attack, but when teams are determined to defend and sit back, we struggle big time. Christopher Knowles, Cardiff and Forest games really highlighted the lack of plan B and the ability to break teams down. Michael Pearson, roller coaster months. Absolutely. We seem to go on these runs up and down, don't we? And I think we're used to it now. Autumn Penkridge, Stoke City game was frustrating. Alexander Haben, Bristol City game was frustrating. Michael Pearson, Huddersfield was frustrating. So lots of frustrating results buried within those months. Tom, I'm going to come to you now, and I just want to give a huge thanks to Dan, who runs our site, for preparing these tables, because they're really good. And Dan's gone into the league tables and things to get these. What we've got here is the points picked up by the current top 12 since the November international break. So that 12-game block that we've spoken about. And if you look at that, Rovers are 7th out of those 12 teams in those last 12 games. So with that in mind, where does that leave you in your view of Mowbray and what Rovers are doing? Have we got that X factor that the likes of Norwich, Brentford, Swansea and Bournemouth have got, for example? What does that make you feel looking at that?
I think it shows that we don't have the X factor that the likes of Norwich, Brentford and Swansea have. But then that's to be expected as well. I mean, there's no way that we could have expected to realistically compete with the likes of Norwich and lump Bournemouth in there as well, because I know Bournemouth are on 21 there, but they've still got that quality. But also on the flip side, it shows that are we that far away really? I would say yes, because the table over the course of the season says we are. But in a weird way, that graphic there has sort of given me a bit more positivity, if that makes sense. Perhaps shows that maybe our form isn't that indifferent to the teams that are around us, which is positive. But it's also frustrating because you look at it and think, well, if they're dropping points or if they're not picking up lots of points, if their form's similar to us, why can't we grab the bull by the horns and go and blow them out the water? Perhaps I'm expecting too much, and perhaps I do expect too much. I just want this team to be able to compete. And at the moment, every time it looks like we're about to start competing, we have a Huddersfield, we have a result where we don't play well and we don't pick up the points. But the graphic certainly gives me a bit of a more positive mindset in terms of where we are compared to those that we're competing with for those places.
And the next one we've got, I think the first one we've got is split into the home and away results. I'll just wait for Dan to flip this up. Here we go. So this one is the top 12 versus each other. So in the 11 games that we've all played against each other, these are the results. So you can see Norwich at the top. They've picked up 7 points at home against the 11 below them, and then 16 points away. So, Ollie, I'm going to come to you. First initial reaction about Rovers on this slide. You know, how does that make you feel? What stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really nice graphic to see it presented that way. I don't think it was a secret that we've struggled against the teams above us and where we're trying to be in the table. I probably hadn't to visualize it like that. It's really, really stark and quite disappointing. I mean, if you look at Barnsley, they're on a bit of a run at the moment, so they're kind of fair play to them. But we've been bitterly disappointing in terms of the results against the teams above us. I don't know. It's tough because I think, I look at how we played against Watford, Bournemouth, Norwich. The Brentford game was a really admirable performance to salvage a draw. Losing away at Bristol. We played really well in all those games, really, really well. And it's quite galling to have lost them all. But we have, and that's why we're at the bottom of that graphic. We played well enough to certainly get a number of draws, if not, even the Bournemouth game, I thought we were much better than they were, and just switched off for goals and punished by 2 moments of really good quality. But that's what happens in this division. It's every game's on a knife edge, and it's about you tipping that knife edge to your side, and it's the fine margins. And in some respects, we haven't been good enough at making them tip our way. And it feels largely down to, concentration, switching off, little mistakes, and being really, really punished. Look at I know it's been talked about before, like Reading's XG in the game at Ewood Park. You cannot, for 3 of those goals, the errors we made are unforgivable, but how clinical they were was, alarming in some respects. Just 4 goals from, 4 whiffs at goal, and it's, it is what it is. We are where we are. I think we've given a really good account of ourselves against a lot of those sides, but not one. And that you can't hide from it because we haven't won those games. But I think you could play some of those again and the outcome's slightly different. But hindsight doesn't get you promoted or up into the playoffs. So, it's quite sad looking at it, really.
Indeed. So we've got another one that we're just going to flip to as well, just to show it in a different way. So this doesn't have the home and away. But if we just go back again, Dan, and we'll come to this one for a follow-up question to Luke. I look at this, Tom, you can see that Watford, for example, I mean, that is a crazy record. 17 points at home and just the 1 away. Should we take any heart, Tom, that our 11 games that we've played against those 11 above us, only 4 have been at home. So if we can get some home form going against these sides in and around us, that could help a top 6 push, couldn't it?
Definitely could, but I think we've also shown with ours that 4 points at home against those sides shows it's not necessarily an advantage for us. But you make a very valid point that Watford, whilst they're toward the top 4 there with the versus graphic, only one of those points has come away from home. So it does show that they aren't particularly good away from home. I think it's the wait and see. I think you never know what you're going to get with Rovers. And I think that I've learned over the years, and especially since doing like the podcasts and coming on the live streams, don't predict too much because you tend to get burnt by it. But you are right. A good set of home results against those around us would certainly be the perfect way to answer the critics of this Rovers side.
Sure. And Luke, just for the final question on this one, so we will skip forward just to the summary of it. We have got to do better against these sides in the top 12. And in particular, you know, look at the records of Norwich, Bournemouth, Swansea, Watford. You know, it's 10 points or more than us. The table really doesn't lie in this sense, does it?
No, absolutely not. But I mean, you've got to. It's already been mentioned in the comments. I think Michael Pearson mentioned it there. You've got to put Norwich, Bournemouth, and Watford in a different league, really, to a point. I don't think we're quite at that level. They've just come down from the Premier League, obviously, and they've, you know, to much majority, they've retained a lot of players. I mean, Solanke at this level's a decent striker for Bournemouth. Obviously, Josh King they've kept, Lewis Cook, players like that. So that they've definitely held on to some real talent. So the good sides, there's no doubt about that. And I think, again, there's a little bit of perspective that's needed. Unfortunately for Rovers, we played Watford, Reading and Swansea all during that October month where we were on a pretty poor run of form, and we're almost waiting to sort of limp into an international break so that we can, you know, pick back up and get going again. So again, if we'd have played them at a slightly different time, would results have been different? We also played Watford for the first time using Iola and Lenihan, and realised, you know, quite quickly that it wasn't working. And Iola was having had a decent game alongside Williams, was then, you know, thrown in again with Lenihan, and it didn't quite work. So we had a difficult month, I think, in October, and I think a lot of that is shown in this, really. And it's unfortunate because we're in a position where we're having to throw players in quite quickly because we're losing players because of injury, and it's that juggling game. And I think it all happened in that 1 month that's really thrown Rovers' first half of the season a little bit. I think if you take October out of consideration, then maybe that, you know, that versus table looks slightly different. But again, you're where you deserve to be, and we are down there. And like Ollie said, it is alarming when you see it in front of you like that, of course.
Absolutely. So the final comparison table we've got is what this means in terms of this season versus last season, which is always a good comparison. Last season, we were on 35 points in 8th after 23 games, 10 wins, 5 draws, 8 defeats, 3 points off 6th. And then this season, we're on 32 points after 23 games, 9 wins, 5 draws, 9 defeats. So basically 1 more defeat and 1 less victory than last season, 5 points off the playoffs. So Ollie, it is the 1 extra defeat this season compared to last, which, if I think about my superstitious nature as a fan, I can pin that entirely on the Chris Hughton game coming for his first match at Ewood Park, Nottingham Forest. I could absolutely see that. But then we've also had the fine margins of 0-0s at home to Borough and Cardiff, and then the draw against Sheffield Wednesday. So turning a couple of those into wins, you know, we do match and then possibly better last season. So I don't share the view that we've gone backwards. But, you know, with this start to the season we've had, and Andy referenced it when he was on earlier, we've probably removed the margin of error now, haven't we, for the top 6? We have to go on a good winning run, a good consistent run of form without that roller coaster that Michael Pearson said earlier. That's the only way for us to make the top 6 now, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I was having a little look before the show. Again, it's a really good graphic to see. And that's probably the frustrating thing, is that I don't think we've gone backwards either, but the table doesn't lie. But it will take, I think we've tended, since being back in the Championship, we've tended to have quite a strong string of results sort of through January and into February. And then we sort of have a bit of a collapse sort of as we work through February and across March, and then maybe a little flourish to just miss out. Hopefully we're going to have to avoid that kind of pattern again if we have a good January, which we often seem to do. That then needs to carry through. I mean, I looked at that first 23 games. I think Dak gets injured in the 23rd game. I think that was Wigan at home, and we had Tosin as well in the side. So they're two very big players to have had for that first half of the season. And I looked at those 10 wins, and I think we beat Brentford at home, which was a very good performance, and I think we did beat Derby. But actually, there's a fair number of teams. I think there was Hull, Millwall, Reading, a very different version of Reading, and not very good Stoke and Barnsley. That we haven't beaten anyone. We haven't beaten any of the top sides this season, I know. But actually, it was only Brentford in those 10 wins in that first half of the season which you'd really stand up and go, that was a really, really surprising win against possibly one of the best sides last season that missed out on the playoffs. So, have we played better than the table possibly suggests? My balance would be, I think we have. And we've been very unfortunate with particular injuries. I think, the centre-back pairings and chopping and changing. If we had Travis for those 23 games, I think some of those draws might be wins and some of those losses might be draws, or possibly even better so. But it's ifs, buts and maybes. So, something special needs to happen. You look at it at the moment and it's 5 points, but it's 5 points with a very, a really good looking top six. So it's, you're having to, surpass what they're managing week in, week out, which is going to be a tall order, I think.
Definitely. So before we let the three of you go, like we did with the first panel section that we had, I'll start with you, Tom. Just the school grade, if you had to rate Rovers this season at the halfway mark, what's your grade for Rovers?
I'm widely renowned as a bit of a happy clapper, so I'm going to surprise you by going with a D. I don't know if that's the lowest one you've had from the panel. Can't remember what other people said, but improvement in performances against smaller teams, maybe. 5-0 against Wycombe was nice. Certainly better than losing 2-1 to Luton at home. End of the day, though, the table doesn't lie. There was a lot of expectation, especially after summer, with some of the signings we made. And at the moment, we're off the boil. And I know that, and I think the stats work that Joe and Andy does is all brilliant. But for me, you can look into the intricacies of the game all you want, and there's definitely some value there, 100%. At the end of the day, it's results that matter. And at the moment, we aren't picking up consistently enough. And that's just a fact, I'm afraid. So that's all I'd say, really. It's not been a terrible season, but so there's definitely room for improvement.
Yeah, it's entirely valid, Tom. And as we said at the start, in Section 1, stats are not for everyone, and people will just go with what they're observing and what they're seeing and not what the stats are saying, which is an entirely reasonable position to take. So you make a really fair point there. Luke, what's your grade for Rovers at the halfway mark?
I'm a little way off that. I'm a little way off the D of Tom's there. So I've gone with a B-. I realised that my wording was really poor. So anyway, that's a laugh for everyone in the comments. Everyone crack on.
Oh, God.
So, yeah. For me, B-. I think I think if we were to have, maybe got into that playoffs, I'd be giving an A. And if we were, first to second, I won't be expecting that. So I'll be sat here, having a very different conversation with everyone. I don't think anyone would expect that. So yeah, B-. We have, in my opinion, we have definitely improved on last year. We're on a plus 11 goal difference. So and we're down there. So we are. Rovers have never been renowned for scoring goals. So to actually be losing on fine margins now and having emphatic wins, I think that in itself is an improvement. 18-19, we were 14th after 23 games. Yes, last season we were 8th after 23 games. But then again, like I say, when you're looking at perspective and timings in seasons, this time last season to the day we were 13th and we're now sitting 11th. So COVID's really impacted seasons. It's impacted teams. You can't make excuses for it. But I think we're on an upward trajectory, and the second half of the season will be telling. So we'll sit here, and I might be giving a very different opinion after 46 games, but I think that's where we need to look at, really, given the course of the season and everything that's happening around us.
Sure. And Ollie, final word, your grade for Rovers?
Yeah, probably very similar to Luke. Well, if we were 6th or better, you'd be AA plus territory. So it feels harsh to dip lower than a B plus from my perspective, as noted, with the top scorer. Yes, we're 11th. We're the top scorers in the division, which is quite a new thing as Rovers fans, I think. Got a really healthy goal difference. Implemented a new system of play. Whether you like it or dislike it, I think we've shown some really exciting moments this season. We've seen a really flourishing Joe Rothwell in a new position that's very exciting. We've got with players to come back and probably complement that system, and how well Brereton works in that front three. There are problems. It's a B-. There are problems and plenty of scope for improvement. But yeah, probably feels about right in my opinion.
Indeed. So, Tom, before I let the three of you go, you and Ollie are regulars on the 1875 podcast. So just plug that for those of our viewers that don't know about the 1875 pod and what you and Ollie do.
Yeah, so it's just I think we put it together a couple of years ago now, actually, we started it. It's been through changes. I know Andy comes on it as well regularly. He does some of the interviews. And yeah, it's just basically... It's myself, Ollie, and Alex, who I'm sure everyone's aware of on the live streams. Just talking Rovers basically. I know we did a special end of year awards that you were on, Ryan, as well, which was great fun with Jacob from Lancs Live. So yeah, it's just people talking Rovers basically. It's similar stuff to this, pre-recorded, so we don't have Luke's mess ups and innuendos. So it's one of them. Yeah, it's good fun though, and obviously we'd appreciate anyone that came over and listened and give us any feedback, because we're obviously always looking to improve the service.
I think I called it in a retweet the original and best a few months ago, and it does remain that. So an absolute staple of the Rovers chat offering. So if you're not aware of the 1875 pod, go and check them out. They do a great job, and I enjoy listening to them. And as you say, I was on it the other day. So we are going to attempt, like they do in F1, to make these pit stops even quicker every time. So we're going to substitute out Tom, Ollie and Luke, and bring in our next panel. So Tom, Luke, Ollie, thanks for joining us, guys. And we will bring in the next panel for the next section, which is going to be all about the January transfer window and a little nod towards the Doncaster game in the absence of On the Other Side and our other live streams this season. So, Joe, our little filler waffle talk this time is about something you put on the Rovers Analytics account the other day, which was about a player that you've just been looking at that maybe it'll be a summer signing if it's a permanent and needs money. But do you want to just talk us through that?
Yeah, so probably from now until kind of summer, to the effect that Andy went through last year, try and find some European players that we can talk about and look at. There's a full thread on this with video stuff that we can't show here for copyright reasons. So if you want to go and check that out on the Rovers Analytics account, then be sure to show it some love. So yeah, just going to be highlighting some different players. Predominantly at the minute, looking at left-footed centre backs. There's going to be a few different versions of this coming out for different players. And this player, for example, just to quickly show you guys what kind of things we're looking for. You know, we're looking at players 26, 25 and under in terms of age. And because of the new rules with signing players from abroad after Brexit and stuff, you know, we're looking for players that are playing 40% of minutes for their team in leagues like the First Division in Belgium. And then in terms of actual playing data, we're looking for players that can win the ball in the air as well as pass with their feet. And we are looking for a Darragh Lenihan partner. So I am trying to find people that are left-footed. So that's what we'll be doing. I'll be doing loads of different ones of that. We've still got the series going on where I'll be looking at potential replacements for players. If we lost, it's called. So we've already done Lewis Travis and we'll be keeping that going as well. And as I ramble on about all of the stuff that will be taking place on the account, our seamless transition has taken place. Very impressive.
It worked.
So yeah, back over to you, Ryan. We're here.
That worked wonders. We are getting good at this. So as you can see, we have now been joined by Glenn Entwistle, Howard Abbott and Alex Lomax, who have been on our live streams before. So you are live stream veterans. So Glenn, I will start with you. Loving the shirt. How are you doing, mate?
Good, thank you. Yeah, just getting back into the swing of things, obviously after Christmas. Bit of a depressing time, but a win on Saturday was a good bit of tonic to pick up the feelings. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, good to be on.
Good.
Alex, how are you, mate?
First week back at uni, long days. I think that's enough said, really. It was good to see the win on Saturday while I was on the train, on my 10-hour train journey. So that was that kind of got me through it.
10 hours? Where are you?
I'm in Cornwall.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yes, it was quite a long journey from the northwest on Saturday. But as I turned the key on my uni door, Bradley Dax scored, so that was quite a nice arrival. I quite like that. Yeah, so I'm just kind of getting back into the swing of things and looking forward to discussing this season really and what we think about the future and going forward.
Excellent. And Howard, also liking your shirt. We had a good squad with that shirt. How are you doing, mate?
Not too bad. I missed them days. My first season when I was wearing this shirt. I mean, it's been a long time since then, hasn't it? But yeah, I've been enjoying so far. It's been a good watch, so happy to be involved now.
Good. So this section will be about half an hour as well, Rovers fans, if you are still with us. And this final section, we have themed Rovers in January and beyond. So as I say, there is going to be a focus on the January transfer window, then a little bit about the Doncaster game, which we do have on Saturday. So the January transfer window is open. And we got the very excellent news after the Birmingham game on Saturday that the owners are going to sanction the addition of, I think, at least 2 signings likely to be on loan. Rovers fans, if you've heard any other rumours or whatever, this is probably dangerous for me to ask this question, but I will. Any other rumours that you've heard, stick them in the comments box and we will see. But one that we are very, very strongly linked with is Jared Branthwaite from Everton. And Glenn, I'm going to come to you first. We've had recent success with our last 2 younger Premier League loans in Tosin Adarabioyo, who is there, and Harvey Elliott. Are you happy that this is the market that we're likely to operate in January for this less than stable defence that we've got at the moment?
Yeah, I think you have to be honest. I think we haven't got the money to be going for a player in the prime. We are going to be looking at the people at the beginning of their careers, towards the end of their careers. And I think you look at Tosin last year, he was brilliant. I think he's just what we're missing this season at the back with Lenihan. If we can bring somebody in who's obviously potentially not the same quality, but kind of on that upwards trajectory, I think that would be brilliant. Like I said, someone young and old. If I had to pick, I'd take someone young like Branthwaite and maybe somebody a bit more experienced. I remember back in kind of 1999, 2000, when we were getting promoted, we brought in Mark Hughes, and what a signing that was. That experience, that kind of old head. I think you look at our squad at the minute. There's not really that many old heads and experience in there. You've probably got Douglas, and that's probably about it in there, isn't there? At the minute, Ayala's actually younger than I thought he was when we signed him. I thought he was kind of coming to the end of his career, but It amazed me when he was only 29. So yeah,
definitely.
So Alex, it's a strong link at the moment, obviously, with Branthwaite. He broke into Everton's side last season with a few appearances, and he came from Carlisle, where he didn't play loads of games at Carlisle, but he was quite highly rated from his time there. And I've seen some video stuff from his time there, and he did quite well. So he can obviously play left centre back as well, which I think is going to be quite important. Would you be happy with his signing that we reckon is probably going to come?
I think so, yeah. And when you compare to a lot of the other options out there, I think, especially Kipre, who I think you discussed on Saturday for the bits of the live stream that my 4G would allow me to hear, that I don't really believe that the optics of that deal would really work. You know, someone who, you know, for good reason turned us down in the summer for Premier League opportunity, which is fair enough. Coming here to kind of play out the season wouldn't be good optics, but I think a young lad who's definitely got a point to prove, who doesn't have much league experience, granted, but neither did Tosin before the season, last season either. So yeah, I think it's a deal that looks doable to me financially, which I think ultimately will be the constraint on us. It's what can we do financially, because I can't see us, as Glenn said, making any permanent signings or for anybody who, you know, is, you know, in the prime of their career. So it seems like a reasonable loan signing to me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting a centre back in. I mean, it's like we're running out, really. It's like one by one the flies kind of drop. It's like every other week. So I think we might need to sign 4 to get us through to the end of the season. But yeah, certainly a deal that I think is a good one to have. And yeah, I don't have any complaints about that. And I think I don't really have any concerns about him not playing many league games. I think Harvey Elliott was sort of similar. He didn't play many league games for Fulham, and then he moved to Liverpool at a young age and hadn't played much league football. So it's certainly not, I'm not comparing him to Harvey Elliott or anything like that, but it's certainly not an inhibiting factor, in my opinion, that he wouldn't be able to do the job. And I think our loan signings under Mowbray have certainly improved from what they used to be back in the early Championship days. I thought really that's where the club shot itself in the foot, that the loan signings it made really weren't up to scratch when you looked at the other clubs. But I think when you look at the loan signings we've made under Mowbray, whether it be Adebayo, Reed, they're much higher quality loan signing that kind of fit straight into the first 11 and really improve as, you know, a player that we couldn't get and couldn't afford on a permanent basis. And that's what really you're looking for with a loan signing.
Alex, we've had some premonitions in the comments about what they think your mid-season grades might be. Which is
the only thing I'll say on mid-season grades before we go on is that I was listening before I was allowed on to the stream, and I don't understand the Americanization of like pluses and minuses. Like when I was at school, you didn't get like a plus or a minus. You just got like a grade E or an F in my case.
Now they're on numbers, and it doesn't make any sense now either, because now it's like 1 to 9 and all that. And you're thinking, what does that mean? So
yeah, like when I was doing A-level chemistry, it was like it wasn't E plus, it was just an E. It was like, yeah.
So A-level chemistry is not one you look back on fondly, then?
No, I didn't do too bad in the end. It was the early mock exams that were a bit of a disaster. But yeah,
good
yeah. So I won't be going for the pluses and minuses, just to give forewarning on that.
So I'll move us on then. Howard, we're in a real hotbed of large Premier League clubs and academies in the Northwest. When you think of Man United, Man City, Liverpool, Everton, all up here. And Stuart Jones on Andy's podcast that we spoke about earlier has spoken really highly about our Category 1 academy status in being able to pick off players that might have been released from those clubs. So if you think of Rankin Costello and Travis, they started their careers with these bigger clubs. Us having that Category 1 status allows us to attract these players more than maybe clubs in and around us. This could be a real advantage for Rovers, couldn't it, long term, especially with our cash flow so poor and the trust that Mowbray's now got from these bigger clubs. If we keep bringing in the likes of Adebayo, Elliott, etc., that could really work for us, couldn't it?
Oh yeah, well, that's the thing that we're seeing now, isn't it? We're seeing the mix of the loans coming in that had the experience in the areas that we need, but we're also seeing the likes of John Buckley, Joe Rankin-Costello, them types of players in and around the squad who are, just getting the experience that they need at that age. When we've been in the previous championship seasons, we've never really had them young options, have we? Like when you think back to the Rhodes times, did we even have any good youngsters back then? We got Mahoney from Stanley, didn't we? But other than that, wasn't much, was there? But yeah, that's the advantage of having a Category 1, definitely. But in terms of the centre-halves in the Category 1 academy, I'm not too sure of if any of them will be possibly making the step up. I kind of thought McGlaughlin maybe would have got a good look in this season. He obviously got that loan to Hartlepool, I believe it was, wasn't it? And it came at I felt kind of a bad time for him, really, because I feel like he probably would have got a start at some stage, because there was a game, weren't there, where we had quite a few injuries, and I think a suspension came in around that time as well. So it's certainly something that we need to use to our advantage around these times, because again, the injuries never seem to stop, especially with the centre halves that we're stuck with. And see, sometimes we're going to need to hang our hat on a few of these youngsters and give them a really good go, like the Carters and the McGlaws and the Graysons and the Barnes and players like that.
Yeah. Alex, another name linked with Rovers is Cedric Kippe, and you kind of nodded earlier to that. He joined West Brom over Rovers in the summer. He was part of a pretty decent Wigan back line at the end of last season as well. Would you be happy if he did come in?
Happy in the sense that the position would have been filled, I think. Unhappy in the sense that I would believe that the club was possibly being taken for granted a little bit and kind of taken for a bit of a ride. I want to believe that certainly since Mowbray's come in, it's one thing I've praised him for. I can count on one hand the times I've walked off the ground when I thought, oh God, that was awful, and the players weren't really up for it. I don't think I've ever said that actually since Mowbray's been manager of Rovers, and I just think the optics of a player that did turn us down in the summer for Premier League money, there's no issue in that. The player's got to look after his family and earn the money he can in a short career. I don't have an issue with that at all. But I just think the optics of that for Rovers, in the direction the club's going, kind of looking to develop and improve as we go ahead. I just don't think that particular player, I don't think it will be a good fit for us. But in terms of his ability, I believe he could probably slot in quite well. He did very well for Wigan last season in a side that didn't finish too far below us in the end. In real points, obviously got the deduction. But yeah, so I'd take him in the sense of I believe that he would be good enough, but I understand that some fans would probably be a bit naffed off if he did turn up after the situation in the summer, and I understand that.
And Glenn, we can't talk about the January transfer window without talking about potential departures. The likes of Nyambe and Joe Rankin-Costello can start talking to other clubs, I believe. And indeed, the news on Nyambe today, I think long-term is less positive, but short-term, we might exercise a clause in the contract that gives us another year. We, of course, then might also be vulnerable to bids from Premier League clubs who are panicking. Adam Armstrong, case in point, Premier League clubs always panic by the Championship's top scorers. How worried are you that we either might lose a big name or indeed some of these youngsters?
It's a similar level of worry for both, to be honest. Like you say, you get to January, whoever's struggling at the bottom of the Premier League looks at strikers in the lower divisions, usually lower divisions abroad. Somebody doing well in France, somebody doing well in Holland. So I am concerned about Armstrong. My big worry is the number of goals he scored for us this season. It is far and away our top goal scorer. There's no one near him, and I wonder how we'd play without him. Whether we have somebody else we can plug and play in that position, or whether we'd maybe resort to, is Gallagher going to play up front? In which case, you can't really play that system we play at the minute. But in many ways, I think that's to our advantage, because I think Armstrong isn't the sort of player you can slot into an Allardyce West Brom. He's a player that plays on the break, which maybe does kind of suit some teams, but he's not that big, strong striker to hold the ball up. In terms of Nyambe, Rankin-Costello, big losses. Nyambe for me is he's a top fullback. He's a modern fullback. He's got the pace, he's got the power, he's got the strength. The only thing he's potentially lacking a little bit in is the final ball, but I do see that improving, and I think he does offer us a lot down that right-hand side. If we have to kind of tie him down to just 1 year, it's a year more of him, which I'd like, but obviously we'd want him long-term. Ranking Costello, I don't think we'd see potentially someone from the Premier League coming in for him unless it was someone going up from the Championship. So like we saw with Conor Mahoney when he went down to Bournemouth when they were in the Premiership, I think they were getting promoted. You can see why players go that way. And I think just to finish up talking about Kipra, just to give an alternative view to Alex, it's in terms of Rovers fans not being too happy he turned us down. Professional footballers will back themselves. So if you get given a Premier League opportunity, I'd be more upset if he didn't take that opportunity and he signed for Rovers. He's showing ambition. He wants to play at the top of the game. I totally understand that we offered a contract, he didn't want it, now he's come grovelling back kind of view. But I wouldn't hold that against him. I think he thinks he's a Premier League player. He's backed himself. Let him come to Ewood and prove he's a Premier League player is what I'd say. So.
Absolutely. Howard, on more positive news, though, in January, so away from contracts and players leaving and things like that, we have got the better news that Dak and Travis are back. So there's kind of two things that I want to ask you in this. So we've got the double joy of, as I say, Travis returning, Dak's first goal on Saturday. So firstly, how excited are you for their return? And then secondly, if we think about Dak and Travis in this side, injuries are something this season that are going to be inevitable. Other players are going to get injured this season. But do you think if we can keep Dak and Travis fit, regardless of what injuries are in and around them, it might allow us to cope a little bit better? So sorry, a couple of questions for you there, Howard. So how excited are you for their return first? And then secondly, with them in the side, can we cope with injuries better?
Yeah, in terms of how excited I am to see them back, I mean, my God, I don't know, I don't quite know how to put it to words. Seeing Dak come on against Sheffield Wednesday, it's like something out of a film, weren't it? You've waited that long and then you get that nice little ending moment. It was brilliant to see. And then him taking that goal against Birmingham, I mean, I said after the game to a few of my mates, it's just, you look over the last 12 months, if that ball falls to a Holtby or a Rothwell, they don't do that. And that's exactly what we've lacked in the last 12 months, that little killer instinct of just hitting the ball first time and putting it in the back of the net. I mean, Joe Rothwell would probably pick that ball up and try and beat all four of them like Dolan tried to, and we just end up going into the middle of nowhere. It's just one of them things, isn't it? And having a player that's able to do that on such a regular basis of such high quality, I'd be foolish to say that it doesn't make us better and it doesn't at least give us that a little bit of optimism or more optimism of bettering ourselves in this league than where we currently are. And the same applies to Travis, really, because again, this season we've just missed that tenacity, that just that bulldog type thing. He's just a horrible sod to play against, isn't he? I mean, he's a bit like Ben Pearson in that regard. I mean, I absolutely hate playing against Ben Pearson, and I'm sure other opposition fans or even players maybe hate playing against Lewis Travis because he's just in your face all the time, isn't he? And without putting anything badly on Tom Tribals or the Bradley Johnsons, I don't really think they're like that. I think they have certain strengths that maybe Travis doesn't have, but Travis is such a complete midfielder in that regard that I think any team would miss him, and it's bigger relief to have us back. In terms of what was the second question? Sorry, could you repeat it?
Just injuries. So I think injuries are inevitable. We're not going to go to the end of the season without more injuries and possibly to the level that we've had. But if we can keep Dak and Travis in the side, is our ability to cope with these injuries better with the quality that those two bring?
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, I think in terms of Dak and Travis coming back, I think we maybe might have to expect maybe they'll miss a couple of games. It's just one of them things, isn't it? They've both had long stretches out. They're going to probably pick up slight niggles and then not be risked for maybe a midweek game when there's two games on a Saturday in between it. So, yeah, I think we can expect maybe a bit of rotation with them, especially in like the coming games. But that's the advantage of having your Jacob Davenports, your Tom Tribals, your Joe Rothwells, who can just come in and just make that difference and slot into the positions where these will play and do a good enough job to the fact that we can still compete against the sides we're coming up against. But yeah, injuries are going to happen, aren't they? They're going to happen to probably everyone, though, in our luck, aren't they? But it's just about how you adapt to it. And I think because of the depth that we have in options, especially in these areas, I think we've got good enough players to cope and still push on and at least maybe try and get ourselves in the conversation.
Definitely. So the final topic within this section is just a little nod to the Doncaster game on Saturday. There is a game on Saturday, but as I say, we aren't doing our usual content of live streams and things. So we're just going to squeeze it onto the end of the show here. So we just got a couple of questions in the absence of on the other side. So Alex, I'm going to start with you first. It's been a relentless season so far with the games thick and fast. And before that Birmingham game, I felt a little bit like we were falling over the line, maybe, just with the injuries and how relentless it had been. But we've also got players returning from injuries and some youngsters knocking on the door. So how would you approach this game on Saturday against Doncaster?
I think you look at the league table, at least as far as I'm concerned, and I think what concerns me more than the points difference is more the number of teams between us and the top six. And so you look at that and you probably say, well, that's quite unlikely unless we went on a mega good run. And then you then think, well, what are we really playing for the remainder of the season? I think certainly under Gary Bowyer's second full season, even though we were a mile off the playoffs in the end, I thought that cup run really kind of give the season a bit of a shot in the arm and got the mood around the club up again. And we got a massive crowd in for the quarter-final at home, the replay against Liverpool, and the mood of the club changed and the whole atmosphere around the place changed. And so I'd be reluctant to forfeit the cup. I'm a bit of a romantic about the FA Cup. I quite like it. I quite like the idea of trying to get us through as many rounds as you can. Trying to draw one of the big boys and go away from home and try and create a giant killing, really. So I'm a bit of a romantic in that way. So I would go as full strength as would be reasonable. So I'd probably go with Travis and Dak. They've got to start sometime. I think this sort of game is probably going to be of a lower intensity than usual, than probably a full-on championship match. So less, quality opposition. So I certainly would start both of those because they've got to get match fitness.
Sorry.
Other than that, what would I do with the defence? You maybe want to give Pers a game. He's probably not played for a long time, so you probably look to give him a run out. And then with the defence, it's really a case of who's available. You're probably going to have to go makeshift again, aren't you, really, unless we bring anybody in before Saturday. So you're probably looking at playing Bell at left back again, and then if Nyambi's still self-isolating and Rankin Castello's not fit, then you're looking to play Douglas at right back. So that's really all we've got at the minute. And then, so I don't think there's as much room for variation as people may suggest. I think a lot of the players I would have suggested to play have kind of been loaned out in the past 48 hours. So that kind of scuppered what I was going to... I think it scuppered Glenn as well. I saw his message earlier. But yeah, I wouldn't deviate too much. I would give some of the players that have played loads of minutes, like Harvey Elliott, Adam Armstrong, Joe Rothwell. I'm trying to think now. Ben Brereton, a bit of a rest and get your likes of Tyree Stoll and your Jacob Davenports a lot more game time because I think they need it.
Glenn, kind of on that note, Alex touched on it. The FA Cup might have lost a little bit of its magic, but do you think it's still, are you still a romantic with it?
Oh, I love the FA Cup. Yeah, I think when maybe not so much watching Rovers in it anymore, but when you're watching like a giant killing on the TV, there's nothing better than rooting for a team you've got absolutely no association with to beat the likes of Burnley, Liverpool, United. It's just a proper giant killing. I do love that. Like Alex, I'll never forget that. I think it's semi-final at Old Trafford, Pedersen back post, missing that header against Chelsea. That I can't believe how close we were to a cup final that day. But I think Mowbray's kind of got his hands tied a little bit. He's got injuries, and the players he has got, I presume he will want to wrap them up in cotton wool to an extent. I think, like Alex has said, I'd be giving Piers a run out in goal. I think as a goalkeeper, you could be called upon at any time, so giving him 90 minutes should be good. At the back four, it kind of picks itself. I didn't have Bell in there. I thought kind of left Douglas in him, but put him at left back and thought, let's see what someone from the under-23s can do at right back. It's a good opportunity. I then had Carter at centre half, so that's gone out the window as he's gone out on loan today. So I've got Joe Grayson and somebody else. How accurate that is, I'm not sure in terms of injuries. Midfield, I've got Travis in for the game. The minutes, I'd probably give him till half time, get some minutes in the legs again, and the same with Dak. But I also had a look at kind of Doncaster's run, because I thought, are they likely to rest anybody? Because they're up near the top of the table at the minute, but they haven't actually played since the 22nd of December. So they've got kind of 15 days since their last game. So there's an element of either they're going to be rusty or they're going to be raring to go. So I think in terms of what we're going to come up against, I think it is going to be a team that's kind of pushing. Just to do my on the other side bit, I had a look at their squad as well, and they've got Josh Sims in there, who I think plays on the wing for them. I remember him at Southampton, and he looked a real prospect. So with a bit of Wikipedia searching, he's been at Red Bull for the last 2 seasons. He hasn't played too often, but that's quite a step from Red Bull to Doncaster, isn't it, in terms of where you're going? So there's obviously potential there. I'd want us to take it seriously, but at the same time, I wouldn't want it to jeopardise our league standing. In terms of defenders, I don't think we should be risking Lenihan and the likes. So, similar to Alex, I'd love us to take it seriously, but I think we just need to maybe put the brakes on a bit in terms of risking players, but at the same time, get minutes in the legs.
So just as you were talking there, Glenn, we popped up an image of Dan Pike and John Buckley there as potentials that might fit who you'd like to see. And can I just say that you've played an absolute blinder as a pseudo on the other side guest there. So thank you for doing your bit to cover Doncaster. So just to round this bit off about Doncaster, just to bring up where they currently are in the league. As Glenn says, they could be raring to go because they've not played since the 22nd of December. And despite some of those postponements, they are right up there in 4th position. If they do win their 2 games in hand, they're only a couple of points behind Lincoln City at the top. So a dangerous side on their day, and certainly one that if we mess about with that side too much, we could get our fingers burnt. And I think Glenn summed it up perfectly. They're either going to be raring to go or they're going to be so rusty. So we just need to be careful in this game. But we'll see what Mowbray does. I'd like to see some of those under-23s. I'd like to see Dak and Travis get some more minutes. I'd like us to use this game to our advantage without the league. So we'll see how Rovers approach it. And thank you 3 for your insight on that game. So before we finish off then, you 3 have also got the benefit of giving your school grade in American or British format, however you want to do it. But our viewers are begging for Alex's grade, so we're going to leave him till last. Howard, what's your grade on Rovers so far this season at the halfway point?
I've been thinking for a while, and I've gone from a B- down to a D, then a little bit back up, and then I'm still thinking, but I've settled for a C-. I think about average. It feels a lot of this feels very samey to me, like the last 2 years. So that's why I'm maybe not edging it a little bit too high. And while I also feel like we're underachieving in terms of the squad that we actually have, which also brings it down quite a lot. So I think we just I fall into that average kind of rating, which I think's fair. But I'd hope that we'd see a drastic improvement coming into this year, because I don't think we can afford to be in and around where we are, really. We're better than that, and I think we have to show it, especially with Dak and Travis coming back, and we've kind of just used as a bit of an excuse at some stage. I felt for a few poor results and performances.
So that's Howard's grade there. Glenn, where are you, higher or lower?
Ooh, it's like play your cards right. I was torn between a C+ and B-, and then I saw you can't go American. So the forever optimist, I'll go for a B. I think there's room for improvement, but we're not far off. I think Luke mentioned it earlier. Looking at the table today compared to 12 months ago isn't a good analysis because of the number of games, the way the season's been condensed and whatnot. We're not a million miles off playoffs. We're in touching distance. I'd rather not have had our run yet and have our run later in the season. So I'm still the optimist. I think B, room for improvement. We have got Travis and Dak back. Mowbray is kind of out of that kind of excuse in terms of creativity and underbelly, and now's the time to push on, really.
Excellent. Alex, give the viewers what they want. What's your grade?
I'll go with the old GCSE and I'll give Mowbray a pass, a grade C, I think. You look at last season, we finished 11th, we got 63 points. You look at this season, we're 11th, we got 32 after halfway. It is kind of treading water, isn't it, really? When you look at it in the cold light of day, you can't really come to any other conclusion than that. I do think there's been extenuating circumstances. I do think we've been hit particularly harshly with injuries in defence, when I think we probably went into the season and one player short in hindsight, and maybe one player short than we should have been, even though we were all kind of jumping up and down on deadline day. So I think there has been issues in the first half of the season. I think the style of play's moved on an awful lot. That has to be said. So what I'm looking for really for the remainder of the season is Mowbray can't afford to regress on last season. I mean, to regress on last season's points and position with a better squad would be unacceptable. It would be, a lot lower than a grade C. But I think currently where we are, Rovers tend to do better in the second half of the season, historically. So I think we'll probably end up being between around, I would say, 7th and 10th. I'd probably say we'll end up finishing around there. And to me, the squad we've got, that's probably just a bare pass for me.
Thank you, Alex. So Howard, just because we've done it on the show today, so can you just explain to our viewers about the show that you and Jacob do on the YouTube channel?
Yeah, so me and Jacob do a little series called The Verdict on the Rovers Chat YouTube channel. We've done 3 episodes so far. We did the one on the Stuart Downing signing, which seems like years ago at this point, and a few little throwaway ones about Tony Mowbray signings and sort of our best 11. So yeah, check them out if you haven't. We should have a few more coming out soon. Hopefully we'll get a few of them sorted. So yeah, we're hoping to put a lot more content on the channel for people to enjoy.
So check that out, everyone. As I say, we've covered the 1875 pod, the stats show on the other side, the live streams we do, the verdict. There's plenty of content in there for everyone. If stats are your thing, then lean towards Joe and Andy's stuff. If it's not, then you might check out some of the other stuff we do. So do go and check out our wide range of content on there. But Joe, I think that we've reached the end of the line with this one. I think we've had a nice look at the season so far. Lots of good insight, lots of different things that we've brought to the viewers tonight. For what it's worth, my grade, I am going to use the American Alex. I'm going B- because I think there are plenty within those metrics and those stats that Andy and Joe have presented which show that this team has progressed. But I absolutely take on board some of the comments that people were saying, well, actually, that should be leading perhaps to some better results and maybe higher in the league with some of that. And the results against the top 12 as well, when we've had the possession and we've had those chances, perhaps there is an element of underachievement. So it's B- for me, because we've come on as a side, the minus because maybe we're not getting what we deserve. So that is my American grade. And in terms of Mowbray, I am absolutely in the camp of Mowbray in. Let's be patient. There is so much right with this club off the pitch at the moment. So much right on the pitch as well with the stuff that Andy and Joe have presented. So I think he has absolutely earned the right for us to be patient. And yeah, let's see where we are in the summer. If we've lost some players, if we've not made the playoffs, if we're at risk of losing further players because of the contract situation, maybe we have to look at things at that point. But I think in a crazy world of instability, now is not the time to be sacking a manager who brings you stability. So that's my view. So Joe, you can have the final say. What's your grade? What's your views on Rovers?
So I'm going B. Obviously, most people who watch a lot of our shows know that I didn't really expect and continue to not expect the playoffs. I think the main thing for me is that, we're so desperately knocking on the door to finish 6th. There's a huge difference between finishing 6th and actually getting promoted. And I think, yes, even though we all kind of say, oh, well, we need to be finishing 6th, nobody expects us to actually go up. Nobody expects us to be beating your Watfords and your Bournemouths in playoff games. I'm happy with the football that we're playing. I'm happy with the goals we're scoring. I'm happy with the talents that we're producing and the youth development. And I'm happy with the direction that the club is going in. I'm quite content with Championship football. Promotion for me is a financial gain. And with the way the football is at the minute, I'm just happy that we do play creative football, and we've scored the most goals in the division. So a B for me, and the only reason it's not higher is just because we aren't in those playoff areas. But it's not something I expected, so B.
And that is very, very fair, Joe, and a good way to end the show. So I just want to thank all of our viewers, particularly those of you that have stuck for the 2 hours. Apologies that I overshot the mark with my time estimation, but I hope that you've enjoyed the content that we've brought and the discussion that all our panelists have brought to the show this evening. You've had a good cross-section of Rovers chat tonight. 9 panelists plus me and Joe. That's 11 of us from the site who you've heard from tonight. So I hope that you've all enjoyed it. Just to let you know, if we do sign somebody over the coming days, we will do a transfer special just on that player. So look out for that on our YouTube channel. But if we don't sign anyone before the Stoke game, which is our next game, our next live show will be on the other side a week on Friday. So you've got potentially quite a long time to wait for our next live content. We've all got the weekend off this weekend, but if there is a signing, we'll be on. If not, join me on the other side on Friday the 16th, I think it is, or 15th. And then we'll be available and with you for our pre and post-match live streams as usual for the Stoke game. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, where you can check out all of our content from all the guys that have joined us tonight, we are Rovers Chat on YouTube. Please hit that subscribe button and tell your friends. And if you are not following us on Twitter, it is Rovers_chat on Twitter. So, Joe, I'm going to give the final thank you to you. Thank you for being, what Strike Force are we? I'm the old man in Danny Graham. You can be the youngster in Adam Armstrong. Thank you for being a dream Strike Force tonight.
Oh, thanks very much, mate. Obviously, not everyone will know, but Ryan pretty much put all of this together and wrote out the script and together with Dan has kind of pushed this one. So really great work, and I think everyone that's been involved will, from people that have watched and people that have contributed, will say thank you. So thanks to you, Ryan, from all of us as well.
No, I love it. It's a nice distraction from what's going on in the world at the moment. So I've enjoyed it as well.
Stay safe. Our American viewers, you might want to come and join us. Darwin's looking quite good at the minute.
Yeah, everyone stay safe. And as we have said before on our streams, if any of you are struggling at the moment with the latest lockdown, with any isolation issues, anything like that, either the Rovers Chat Twitter account or any of our Twitter handles, hopefully you've seen all of them. Our direct messages are always open. So please give us a follow, reach out to us. It's a tough time for everyone at the moment. So absolutely, I hope that everyone stays safe and keeps well. So we will finish this live stream with our usual sponsor message from 6yardsout.com. Thanks, everyone, and see you all soon. See you later.
The Rovers Chat YouTube channel is proudly sponsored by 6yardsout.com. They've got retro football from every era with mugs, phone cases and much more. They also have plenty of Rovers goods, including apparel with the famous 94-95 season and this season's kit. Check them out using the link in the description below.